let's get started. I have a very special guest. I decided, on the podcast, I got to raise the bar a bit, and I've never had a Lord on the podcast. So Lord Fusitu'a is on the podcast here. He's from the hospital joining. So I really appreciate him joining today and committing
No worries.
to the podcast. So thanks so much for joining.
My pleasure, brother. It's an absolute, privilege and pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the conversation, man. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. So I did some background research on you, but I'd love to hear from you. And I know, the conversation all stemmed from, I was in Miami for the Bitcoin conference, and I was there when Jack
Nice.
made the announcement. Yeah, it was crazy. The conference was, packed to the brim. And that announcement really shook people of like El Salvador, a country coming in, accepting it as legal tender. And, the Bitcoin community went crazy. And then I just saw different, leaders from different countries putting on laser eyes. And I was like, what is going on? And then I saw you tweet something, basically that the Kingdom of Tonga would like to get involved. And that's really my, not to get involved, you're looking at it or you're interested in it and you're pursuing it. So I'd love to hear about your background and kind of what got you interested in Bitcoin.
So, excuse me, I'm a Lord Member of Parliament in Tonga. So Tonga's was modelled on the UK system of a House of Lords and a House of Commons, except we've got it in one unicameral house. Politician by career, but I'm a barrister and solicitor by vocation. So if I'm talking too much, an attorney and a politician, that's, invariably that's what we do. So you tell me if I'm rambling on too long. I had an experience with it in 2012, 13. I had a relative of mine from the US call me and say, he knows I've always been a bit of a IT computer nerd. And he's like, there's this great new technology, you should get into it. There was no way for me to get any from Tonga at that stage. So he said, I'll get it some, and I'll explain it to you when we meet up. So by the time we'd met up, it had gone up in price and he'd sold it. So that wasn't much good to me.
Right.
And then about 2 or 3 years later, anyone that lives in Mexico, Puerto Rico, El Salvador, Guatemala, they'll know. We have they're like American businessmen that come in, sort of fly by night with a great idea. They might get a few investors from out the country, and then you don't see them anymore after that. So I had an encounter with one of those guys, and I invested, and he said he was going to go and get some Bitcoin on my behalf. I didn't understand the technology that well at that time. And a number of us did, gave him money, and again, not to be seen again. But about 2 years ago, I got really ill, and I had to be flown over to New Zealand, where I actually am now, because Tonga is still in border lockdown since March last year. And I had to medevac. I collapsed in Tonga, and I was very fortunate to get life-saving surgery. But that kept me in the hospital for about 6 months 2 years ago. And without too much to do, I read every word that had ever been printed about Bitcoin, listened to every word that had ever been uttered about it, and watched every moving image that had ever been pretty much broadcast about it. And the technology, once I understood it, it became apparent that as a store of value, it is the most pristine and hardest money and asset that mankind has ever created for the developed world. But for the developing world, it could be life-changing right now. So, for instance, I just came off BTC sessions with Ben and with Miles Suter from Cash App and Guy Swan, and what I was able to, make apparent to them, as you will have seen from the tweets, developing countries like El Salvador, like us, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Caribbean, South America, the Pacific, we spend $700 billion US a year just in Western Union and MoneyGram fees.
Wow. Oh
so
my God.
Just to be able to send money to our family, not for any good or service that's being produced to better mankind, just in fees from Western Union, 700 billion.
That's outrageous. Yeah.
That's outrageous. So in a country like mine, 40.7% of our GDP is made up of remittances. So nearly half of our economy is remittance based. So when Western Union and MoneyGram are lobbing 20 to 30% off of that, you're actually only getting about 21 or 22% of that 40%. So if you remove those fees, you're adding 30% to your entire national GDP.
Right.
You're adding 30% to the pocket of every person. To make that understandable to someone in the US, imagine having no federal income tax anymore. That's the equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's life-changing. It's life-changing for someone in the US who's living a comfortable life. So imagine how life-changing it is for someone that's living hand to mouth in a village in El Salvador or in Tonga.
Great.
So, yeah, that's one of the greatest discoveries recently with what Jack's done is that you don't need to understand Bitcoin, the asset, at all. If you're in El Salvador or in Tonga, just being exposed to Bitcoin, the network, by Strike, immediately adds 30% to your income.
Wow.
So we can orange pill them later, but they're not worried about, they don't care if it's Bitcoin. They just know I'm getting $100 instead of $70 now.
Right.
And because Strike is so seamless in how you decide what format you send it in, and you decide what format you receive it in. So you can receive it in Bitcoin, you can receive it in USD. That seamless behind the scenes integration makes, and you don't need any act of parliament or government policy like adoption for legal tender. That's another step down the line. Just adding one app to your phone suddenly gives you 30% extra income.
That's huge.
And that's the beauty of Bitcoin, is that whereas we're used to going from Bitcoin, the store of value, and then we'll see if it will work as a medium of exchange in the US or elsewhere. In the developing world, and in El Salvador, obviously, because of Bitcoin Beach, it's the other way around. It began as Bitcoin, the medium of exchange, and then after you receive that extra $30 for a while, obviously at the beginning you're going to spend it to increase your standard of living. But after a while, you'll realize that you are able to live on the 70. So you're going to say, well, maybe I'll save the 30. And you'll begin stacking sats with that 30. And so someone who was hand to mouth previously in a village, for that person to be able to actually have savings and possible generational wealth, that's paradigm changing, man. So yeah, it's a big deal. And education about Bitcoin, the asset, and what that can do long term, that will follow. Adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, that's something that I'm going to pursue for our country. That will follow. But just exposure to Bitcoin, the network, right now, that'll be game changing. So yeah.
And what's the feedback been like? I mean, in the Bitcoin community, your name has totally blown up. You know, I see your name mentioned almost by every major influencer. In Tonga, have you gotten reception? What are people saying to you over there on the ground? Have they been receptive? Have they wanted to learn more? Yeah.
Yeah, everyone I know is super bullish on it, because once they understood that that Bitcoin, the asset, the thing that I need to walk you through, I can walk you through that. But Bitcoin, the network, the immediate exposure, that's life changing, and they understand that. And actually, even before Strike, there are people now I know of who are sending money back, instead of through Western Union or MoneyGram, are sending it to warm wallets. So there are already people now receiving their remittances through warm wallets and receiving, excuse me, and not the $70 out of 100. Even layer one Bitcoin sent to a warm wallet is still closer to 100 than the fiat $70 you get through Western Union.
Right.
So yeah, they're super bullish. It's the only thing I'm waiting for is, because our country is fairly small and our health system's not that great. Our government locked down our borders hard in March last year, and we're one of the 6 countries still left in the world with zero COVID. We've never had any because of that. And the concern with the government is if COVID got in, our health system would not survive an outbreak, so it would pretty much wipe out our population. So for that reason, I'm unable to get back into the country and get my feet on the ground and be able to go and present a version of the bill, which the team that rolled it out in El Salvador were kind enough to give me a copy, so I can begin amending it to make sure that it's not in contradiction with any of our existing legislation, and to present it as a bill to Parliament. But I can't do that until I get my feet on the ground back home. So all the work that can be done remotely, I'm doing now. Jack very kindly reached out and said, if you need any help, let us know. So that was very generous of him. And so it's sort of the ball's in my court to figure out exactly what's needed on the ground and sort of report that back to him. So hopefully they'll be able to help. But yeah, that's kind of the plan.
Yeah, and just watching you as a spectator, I mean, you, like, even today I watched your live session with BTC Sessions. You're always on Twitter Spaces. You're always engaging with the community. There's all these different people that you're talking to. I think it's so cool to see the Bitcoin community in action, because I think that's a big differentiator. But the way you're going about it is also, I mean, you're doing a really good job in terms of all the mind share you're doing. So like, I want to piggyback on what you said about the president of El Salvador. It seems like, you know, similar to Michael Saylor sharing the playbook of MicroStrategy with corporations, El Salvador is sharing a playbook of
exactly. Yeah, very much. So his courageousness to step out on his own, and amidst a lot, I'm sure, of local opposition and possibly international sort of two-mindedness, to put the flag in the ground and say he's going to stand by it. That's given us the model to go by. And it may be slightly different in other countries. Some countries may dip their foot in the water first by, for instance, in New Zealand, there was a letter written this week to their Prime Minister by one of the premier economic think tanks called the Lobby, to call on their Prime Minister to recognise Bitcoin as a foreign currency within 81 days. So they've used the day that the bill becomes law in El Salvador as the milestone date, and they're saying to their Prime Minister, you should make Bitcoin recognised as a foreign currency by this date. And the reason that's very clever is that it's almost a backdoor way in, because once it's recognised as a foreign currency, that means it's declassified as an asset. So you no longer have to pay capital gains tax on it. And it becomes, therefore. So all your Bitcoin transactions are now not a taxable event like they are when it's an asset. And you could move in and out of that currency and the local currency much easier. So like I said, the El Salvador model is the baseline, and that's the playbook that we're learning from. But other countries will have their own little amendments to it, trying to reach the same goal.
I'm Lebanese Armenian, so Armenia I think is a great target, and Lebanon is also going through like a hyperinflation type period right now. So I mean, it's just very geared towards countries like that. I think it would be a tremendous benefit.
Absolutely. I've got as you all probably know, you may tell from the accent, I was born and raised in Australia, and there's a lot of Lebanese Australians. So I have a lot of Lebanese friends, and exactly that their feedback to me is everything you're saying about Tonga is exactly applicable to us, because there's inflation, and I've got a good friend who's an economics professor in Beirut, and he's doing a lot of work on in Beirut, correct me if I'm wrong, they use Bitcoin to be transferable in and out of USD, so that you can use it interchangeably. And see, that's another way where either Bitcoin the network or here Bitcoin the asset is being used, whichever way you flip it. Bitcoin, the technology, ends up being answering and being the solution to so many different societal needs, and being able to handle it better than any other type of asset or money has been able to date.
And I've been doing a lot of research on Tonga actually in the last few days, and a lot of Bitcoiners are talking about moving to Tonga, and there may be you may want that, not want that, but is that a possibility? I mean, is there a way for people? I would love to hear about it.
It's been really humbling. I've had so many people reach out, and it's like you said, the Bitcoin community is unmatched. There's people who've done their own research and discovered that Tonga's economy is largely agriculture and fisheries based. So they've gone out and networked with their friends who are agriculture and fisheries experts, and there are a whole swathe of agricultural and fisheries experts who've approached me and said, look, there's not much doing in the US at the moment. We'll pick up and go and live in Tonga and, yeah, help your government with agriculture and fisheries just because they're Bitcoiners. So, yeah, there's no other community that you'd get that from. And we actually do have a path for citizenship by investment, as many countries do. And it involves a couple of $1 million fiat that you need to invest to get automatic pathway to citizenship. But for Bitcoin, because it appreciates at 200% per annum, it will take a lot less, because the real value to the host economy is exponentially growing every year. So it would make sense to put a much lower threshold. And that way, yeah, there definitely is a path. And me personally, for my estate on my island, it's colloquially called Bitcoin Island by the community, because they know there's an open invitation for any Bitcoiner to turn up and come and chill on my island whenever they want.
I will seriously take you up on that. I owe my
That's
wife
us,
a five-year
Definitely.
anniversary trip. So
oh, awesome. We'd love to host you. Consider yourselves invited. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. And just to, I know that, you're super busy, and I'm really gracious of your time. I just had a question for you about potential resistance. So I read a timeline today. I think it was a Forbes article, but it basically said, here was the title, the headline, if I could pull it up. I don't know why it's not pulling up. There we go.
The World Bank one.
The World Bank. Bitcoin must be accepted by World Bank according to charter. And there's this creative backdoor that's being created. So do you have thoughts on that? Do you have thoughts of what the resistance points might be along the way?
Yeah, so there's a reason Christiane Lagarde, the head of the IMF, and her team scrambled when El Salvador occurred, because if you've got a monetary system that's outside the fiat central banking system, then the existence of the IMF and the World Bank becomes superfluous. They're completely irrelevant, because their entire purpose is to entrench that system and to bring as many countries under the bondage of that system as possible. So what they do is, for the developing world, they give out loans, and then they force austerity measures on that country so that it's impossible for you to pay back the loan, and you end up in a cycle of debt. So what they do is they condition developing economies to produce raw materials, and to have those materials sent to the first world, where they turn them into manufactured goods, and then force the developing countries to import them, because they've not allowed the developing countries to develop their own manufacturing bases. It makes them entirely dependent on imports. So that cycle of central bank fiat hegemony gets entrenched over and over again. So the fact that the charter, I mean, I retweeted it with the tagline, World Bank wrecked, because it basically means that not only can El Salvador pay back in Bitcoin, they don't have to pay back in actual Bitcoin. They can pay back in fiat or IOUs backed by that Bitcoin, as you would have seen. And as the value of Bitcoin rises, the World Bank has to pay back the value of those gains. So that paradigm is world changing. So the pushback will come from the central banks. from the US Fed. Even our central bank in Tonga will push back because they're all traditional Keynesian-trained economists. And even though we're in a developing nation, they were trained by the universities in the West to go back and enslave their own countries to the hegemony of the Western central banks. So, but what happens is when someone like, so if a politician like me comes in and says, all right, there's a possibility for you all to get an extra 30% of your income, and the central bank wants to stop it. That's not a good look for any organisation, and they'll have people with pitchforks at their doors if they don't watch out. So the freedom of that Bitcoin, the technology brings, is it's inevitable. Resistance is futile, as the Borg in Star Trek say. It's coming whether you like it or not. And the best way, I think, to receive it is to prioritize the people that it was meant to help most. Because if you study the history of Bitcoin, you'll understand that it was meant to help the least fortunate and those who aren't able to use the traditional monetary system, and help them have a monetary system that they could access without all the drawbacks of the traditional monetary system. So, yeah, both the technology and the community, I can't say how bullish I am about both.
Yeah, and you make me super bullish myself. I can't tell you how good of ambassador you are for Tonga and to the world, and putting
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
I really mean that. I mean, you've done a great job, and this conversation has been fascinating, and it makes me even more bullish hearing from a major politician in a country that looks at this and be like, okay, 30% more. It puts you on the map. It puts you on the world stage. It allows you to be part of this amazing community. So it's just great to see.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it a lot. And I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts and to learn from your thoughts. So, yeah, it's been an extremely positive experience. And this will be the first of many, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. Lord Fusitu'a. This will be posted tomorrow. Make sure to follow him. Make sure to check out all the stuff he's doing in the Kingdom of Tonga. It's just amazing and fascinating. So thanks again.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Okay.